I don't know if you saw the big show. Bernie and Biden did a joint appearance today. It was quite a thing. So you remember the problem, right? The whole reason Bernie lost the campaign was because the only thing people were looking for this year was somebody who was decent and who could beat Biden. I mean, who could beat Trump. Again, what people were looking for in 2020 primary, Democratic voters wanted a guy who could beat Trump. That's really all they wanted. And so when he was asked...
Say it is Biden. Do you think Biden can beat Trump?
I do.
So that was Bernie's forfeiting the race. So when Bernie does that, the race is over. And that's not how you run a campaign. You don't run around assuring everybody that your opponent is going to win in November. That's not how it works. But again, you have to remember what Bernie Sanders said to Chris Hedges when Shama Sawant and Chris Hedges were urging him to run independent in 2016. He said, "I don't want to end up like Ralph Nader," meaning me keeping my Senate appointments and not being a pariah to the Democratic Party is more important than me actually pulling this off. And that's why he lost. And that's why he would say stuff like that. Right there, that is political malpractice. If you're running, when I ran for high school vice president, I knew that you don't say that. Everybody knows you don't do that. And, you know, if I didn't know better, you could see how people could be so cynical to think that Bernie Sanders was threatened to run a horrible campaign, because that's how horrible of a campaign. We're going to get into that a little bit later, but let's watch... Here is his. So, by the way, here he is. They're doing their first joint. Now, do you want to know why? Here's just one little itty bitty thing as to why Bernie Sanders' campaign was a joke. Just look at this. Who looks like the guy who's going to be president, and who looks like a Batman villain? What is that? What is that? He's in shadow. He's leaning over. I see more at the top of his head than his face. Look how nicely Joe Biden is sitting up straight. He's got a nice light on his face. He looks good. He looks like a fucking leader. And Bernie looks like a Batman villain. Just to let you know, they don't really, they miss the big stuff. They miss how to get elected. So here, you want to hear it? It's horrible. It's going to be painful. I'm going to play it for you. It's about 3 or 4 minutes long. It's painful. But I'll play it for you. Here we go. Ready? Here we go.
With 20,000 lives in our country, 500,000 people infected, but has cost us 16 million jobs. And that's probably a conservative number. The real number is probably higher than that. So we are in a terrible moment, an unprecedented moment. And I know we share the understanding that we've got to go forward right now and out of this in an unprecedented way to address the terrible pain that so many of our fellow Americans are feeling. So today I am asking all Americans, I'm asking every Democrat, I'm asking every independent, I'm asking a lot of Republicans to come together in this campaign to support your candidacy, which I endorse, to make certain that we defeat somebody who I believe, and I'm speaking just for myself now, is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. A president, and you made this point, who downplayed this pandemic, who ignored the advice that some of his people were giving him, who has not used the Defense Production Act early on so that we could produce the masks, the gowns, the gloves, the ventilators that our medical personnel desperately need, who today, because I understand that is threatening to fire Dr. Fauci, who has been an unbelievable, who has been day after day the voice of science to the American people, trying to explain how we go forward in this crisis, and he's threatening to fire him. So to me, for all of those reasons and so many more, a president who apparently has never read the Constitution of the United States, who believes he's above the law, a president who lies all of the time, a president who has at least shown me that he is a racist and a sexist and a homophobe and a xenophobe and a religious bigot. I mean, for all of those reasons or more, we've got to make Trump a one-term president, and we need you in the White House. So I will do all that I can to see that that happens, Joe. And I know that there is an enormous responsibility on your shoulders right now. And it's imperative that all of us work together to do what has to be done, not only in this moment, but beyond this moment, in the future of this country. And in that regard, I have been very pleased that your staff and my staff have been working together over the last several weeks to coming up with a number of task forces. These are task forces that will look at some of the most important issues facing this country. The economy, how we create an economy that works for all, not just a few. Education, how we create the best educational system in the world for all of our people. How we deal with climate change, which, as you indicated, is an existential threat to the planet. How we deal with criminal justice, because we don't want to continue having more people in jail than any other country on earth. How we deal with immigration reform, and how we have a healthcare system that is so much better than what we have right now. Now, it's no great secret out there, Joe, that you and I have our different.
Okay, so before I get to this next part, so just so you know, there he is. He fully endorses him in full shadow. He's in full shadow. Joe Biden isn't fully lit like you're supposed to. He's been broadcasting out of his house for over a month now, still can't get a light on his face. Joe Biden doesn't even know where he is, but he looks like he does. Bernie looks like a Batman villain. Looks like he's doing cable access. This guy looks like he's ready to be president. This guy looks like he's going to ask you to borrow him some money. His big idea in that, I don't know if you heard the big idea, he had the complete nauseatingly boring litany of stuff that's bad about Donald Trump, which makes him sound just like any other idiot, makes him sound like Steve Schmidt. And then his big idea, I don't know if you know what his big idea is. His big idea is he's going to appoint task forces to work on all these problems, climate change and healthcare. And he's going to report. That's what he said, right? Mm-hmm. This is the third time I'm listening to it. I still can't believe it. First of all, I fall asleep. It's so hard to keep awake. But I'm pretty sure what he's proposing is task forces to work on our problems. I don't know, Bernie. I thought you've been in government this whole time. You don't have solutions to these problems? You want to appoint another task forces? So that was painful. It's ridiculous. And now let's watch the next part, because Joe actually starts to respond to him. It's this, and so the whole thing is Bernie's sitting here doing a con on the country. So is Joe Biden, because he knows Joe Biden is demented. And he's going to prove it in a second. Watch this.
And we're not going to paper them over. That's real. But I hope that these task forces will come together, utilizing the best minds and people in your campaign and in my campaign to work out real solutions to these very, very important.
You don't have solutions to these problems? Aren't you 78 years old? Haven't you been working? I mean, this is nuts. It's the opposite of inspiring.
Problem. So look forward to working with you and bringing some great people into those task forces.
Watch this.
Well, Bernie, I want to thank you for.
Where am I? What am I supposed to? Am I doing something? What are we doing? Bernie, I don't know. So now he doesn't even know what to say, because apparently what he's supposed to say isn't on the teleprompter that is in front of him.
Yes.
There's a teleprompter in front of Joe Biden right now, and apparently what he's supposed to say is not on it, so he doesn't know what to say, which is why he looks like, hey, there's nothing on the thing.
Bernie, I want to thank you for that. It's a big deal, I think that your endorsement means a great deal. It means a great deal to me.
He has no idea what to say. He has no idea where he's at. He has no idea what is going on. It's a big deal. You guys, there's nothing on the thing. It's a big deal to me. It's a big deal. The deal is big. Have I talked about this deal and the size of it? This is a sizable deal. To me. What? This is like when you're doing when you're just trying to add paragraphs to your essay to your teacher. The Civil War, which I'm glad I wasn't around to be seeing. It's like that's what this is. What is he doing?
I think people are going to be surprised that we are apart on some issues, but we're awfully close on a whole bunch of others. And I think you've made. If I am the nominee, which it looks like now, you just made me.
So they just handed him a piece of paper. He's reading it as he's trying to talk. And the piece of paper says, ask Bernie if he has any questions for you. Remember? You're supposed to ask Bernie if he has any questions for you. That's what the paper says they just handed him.
Need you, not just to win the campaign, but to govern. And so, do you have any questions for me, Bernie, at all?
I did.
Do you see how natural that seemed? Like this isn't wrestling at all. This is real. This is a real conversation two guys are having. One guy's in shadow. One guy's actually lit like he's doing a television spot. This is ridiculous.
Joe, let's talk about some of the areas that I think we are actually fairly close. There are some areas where we disagree, but somewhere
Bernie goes on to say, hey, Joe, what about $15 minimum wage? And then Joe Biden immediately goes, oh, yeah, I'm all on board for $15 minimum wage, baby. And thank you, Bernie, for leading that fight. See how they're already getting along? Do you see how this is already working out for everyone? It's already working out. This is great. We should have just picked Joe Biden a long time ago. You know, the reason why we have Donald Trump is the Barack Obama administration. And do you know that Joe Biden is actually worse than Barack Obama? So what do you think? First of all, we're going to get 4 more years of Trump. That's what's coming. But let's bring in Aaron Mate. Aaron, how are you, buddy?
Hey, Jimmy, how you doing?
Good. You want to put on? There it is. Got to push back.
Got to push back.
There it is.
All right. So I don't know. Did you see this today? Let's get your comment on the. Did you see the video of the dual appearance by Biden and Bernie?
I did see it. I did.
And I just played the first part of it where Bernie is obviously in shadow because he's a Batman villain, and Joe Biden is lit correctly. What? It's just amazing. Can you see that? Can you see how they're not here?
Yeah, Biden's got a way better camera.
He's actually got lighting.
Yeah.
He's actually lit, which is kind of crazy. All right, so do you have any comment on what that? Because my comment is that Bernie recommended task forces between each of the committees that they could work on these problems. You have climate change and healthcare and education, that they're going to create a task force to come up with some solutions to these problems that Bernie's been working on for 40 years.
Jimmy, I'm your resident Bernie apologist. I think I'm the closest you have on your show to someone who defends Bernie. So I'm going to do a little bit of that here. Now, of course, do I think Biden will lose? I do. I don't think he has a very good chance. I think he's a weak candidate, although who knows? And do I think that Bernie ran a weak campaign? I do. I wouldn't call it a joke, but I do think he ran a weak campaign in critical areas. But I want to point out what I see as something positive here, and you probably won't agree, which is that 4 years ago, there was none of this at all. Hillary Clinton felt no need at all to even pretend to listen to Bernie Sanders' campaign. Right now, we're seeing something different where whether Biden and his people are sincere or not, they're probably not, but they're at least pretending to listen to Bernie Sanders and his campaign. And I see that as a positive because it shows that in order to win, Biden at least has the awareness that things can't be business as usual policy-wise with the neoliberals. So I actually don't see today as completely negative. I saw a little bit of positive in it.
I do too. I think it was great. I think it's all going to work out. Okay, so
I agree it's not going to work out. Of course it's not. Of course they're
No, I
going to
think-
sell out on whatever they can. But the fact that they're at least trying to make a show of it shows that, this is not the same as 2016. And at least Bernie's movement is being recognized now as the force that it is. And it doesn't have to go away. It really doesn't. It really doesn't.
yeah, I mean, this time is much better. I mean, he's dropping out months earlier. He's not even going to fight.
Well-
He's completely suppressing his vote going into the convention. So he'll have even less power when he gets there because he's dropping out, but not really dropping out, which is the weakest way to run in the history, because now he's going to keep his name on the ballot, and so people aren't going to come out to vote for him. So he's going to get even slaughtered harder going forward because he's basically endorsed. He just endorsed, not basically, he endorsed Joe Biden, but he's going to stay on the thing and tell people to vote for him. It's the most feckless thing in the world to do, and it's going to make him look even weaker when he gets to the convention. His whole thing now is I want to, influence the platform, which is less than meaningless. And so, again, it's just all, instead of working on the problem, he's working with Joe Biden. He's going to try and help the problem get elected. And right now, Trump is listening to Bernie Sanders more than Joe Biden. So he's the one expanding Medicare for all. He's the one who's going to get rid of student loans. And he's the one, he's got a better chance. Turns out Bernie Sanders he was running in the wrong Wall Street pro-war party. He should have been running in the Republican Party because he has a much better chance of actually influencing policy. Imagine if Bernie was in Trump's cabinet when guys like Kudlow and Mnuchin were saying, let's do direct cash payments. You know who stood in the way of that? Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And you know what Bernie said about it? Not a fucking thing.
And we agree on that. And we agree that Bernie caved on the stimulus bill, the Wall Street bailout. And I appreciate how much you've been calling that out. This is different, though. Bernie has no chance to influence a single thing that Trump does. Trump might be giving some lip service to Medicare for all, and he did say that they're going to introduce that measure to cover everybody who during the COVID-19 crisis. But that's not Medicare for all. That's specific to the coronavirus. Whereas, look, I'm not sure what Bernie should. Bernie is different than the rest of us. I'm not saying the rest of us should be jumping to campaign for Joe Biden, but Bernie is doing what he always said he would do, which is that he would support the Democratic nominee. So the question is, when does he do that? Does he do that now, when he at least has the potential to influence Biden's campaign going forward? Or does he do it when closer to the convention, when Biden's the nominee anyway, and Bernie probably has less leverage? So in terms of what Bernie did today, I don't think, look, in terms of what he did with the bailout and not using his leverage there when he actually had leverage, and you've been pointing this out, he caved there. But on the Biden thing, his endorsement, I think, gets less meaningful to him and his movement the closer we get to the election because he has less leverage. He dropped out and he did what he said he would do, which is endorse Biden. Everyone knew he would do that. It was just a question of when.
Of course, everything you're saying is correct, Aaron. There's no doubt. Everything, but I'll. It doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, I mean, he said he was always going to do this, which really meant I told you I was going to sheep herd a bunch of progressives into the anti-revolutionary party that hates progressives to make sure that a third party or a movement never got started. And it turns out the people voting for Joe Biden agree with my policies fucking anyway. But we're going to all elect a guy who's dedicated to getting rid of them and blocking them. So it's...
Well, there's the question. Let me ask. Listen. I'm not sure what... I'm not telling anybody to vote for Joe Biden in November at this point. I think that Bernie's movement should hold out until Biden actually pledges concretely to do something real, including Medicare for all. That should be a minimum. But I also don't want to obscure what I see as a fact, and maybe you disagree. I think the Trump gang is a far more dangerous gang than the Biden gang to the planet. I do. And I think we should be honest about that. That doesn't mean, now, you could argue that perhaps the dangers of not destroying the Democratic Party establishment outweigh the dangers of reelecting Donald Trump. You can make that argument. I'm not persuaded by it at this point. Because, by the way, if Trump is reelected, I'm not sure if that does anything to advance the cause of destroying the Democratic Party establishment. The Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016 That should have destroyed the Democratic Party establishment. But what happened? They only grew stronger. They gave us a series of cons, Russiagate and Ukrainegate, and they held on to power. And that's because their power doesn't go away. They still own the media and most of Congress. So it's not as if Biden loses in 2020, is if that makes if that means that we become closer to destroying the neoliberal establishment. I'm not sure of that. It's possible, but it's not guaranteed. And meanwhile, we have to reckon with the fact that if Biden loses, that's 4 more years of not just Donald Trump as an individual who I don't really care about. It's the people around him who have inflicted major damage on the world. And if given a second term, they inflict even more damage, possibly existential damage. And I'm not sure if the dangers of that are worth risking if it means potentially, and not even for sure, we deal a blow to the neoliberals who control the Democratic Party.
So I will say that's a very good conventional wisdom. And so now I'm going to tell you why all that's wrong. If you go back to 1992, you can go back to 2008, you can go back to 2012. Let's go all the way back to 1992. George Bush I is running against Bill Clinton. Who was the lesser of two evil in that election, Aaron?
George Bush or Bill Clinton? Oh, it's Clinton.
George Bush is actually the lesser of two evil. And why is that? Well, because George Bush could not get horrible things done because there was a Democratic Congress. For instance, NAFTA. He couldn't get that done because the Democrats couldn't go against their union base. But when Bill Clinton came in, the neoliberal who started the Democratic Leadership Council, put Koch brothers on the executive board of it, he decided that the Democrats were too far to the left and needed to become more like Republicans. So he won and immediately did stuff that George Bush could never do, which was pass NAFTA. George Bush tried to pass NAFTA, couldn't get it done. Bill Clinton gave the Blue Dog Democrats cover to go screw unions for a generation. And that's why he was the greater evil than George W. Bush. Do you think George W. Bush would have been allowed to explode our prison population at the same time he was ending welfare, at the same time he was deregulating Wall Street and getting a private deal to privatize Social Security? He would not have been, because the left would have organized. Hang on, let me finish my point. Because the left would have organized against him, just like the left would have organized against John McCain, had John McCain kicked 5 million people out of their houses during an economic depression. But since it was Barack Obama and Bill Clinton doing these things, the left went to sleep, which is why you got Donald Trump in the first place, and you're prescribing to do the very thing that gives us another Donald Trump, which is why that's already been tried for 40 years, Aaron, and it's failed. I'm older than you, so I've lived this longer, and that's a failed ideology that takes absolutely no thought. It's not original thinking, it's not intelligent, it's a failed strategy that we already have the evidence for.
Did the left stop George H.W. Bush from invading Iraq and invading Panama in his first term? And did the left stop Donald Trump from tearing up the Iran nuclear deal, passing the biggest upward transfer of wealth in U.S. history, tearing up the INF Treaty, likely tearing up the New START Treaty, which is an existential threat to the planet, pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, imposing these murderous sanctions on Venezuela and Iran? No. What happens is, when you have these far-right people in power, is that all your energy is spent stopping their onslaught. Under a centrist like Biden or Obama, if there was an actual organized left, we could try to do something positive. We can't try to do something positive under Trump, because all we're doing is trying to stop them from inflicting the worst damage that they're inflicting. The only, I think, tangible argument you can make about whether it's fair to let Trump win in November is if that brings us closer to destroying the Democratic Party establishment. Because I do think that they are an obstacle to progress. I just don't know if letting Trump win and then once again devoting all of our energies to stopping his onslaught on the planet, plus resisting the neoliberals' attempt to hold on to power, which is what they will do again, as they did with Russiagate, whether that brings us closer to destroying them. I didn't see it happen under Trump. But listen, it's possible. I don't claim to know the answer for sure. I'm just saying I think we have to recognize that in terms of who is at least a shorter term, bigger threat to the planet, it's undoubtedly the people around Donald Trump than it is the people around Joe Biden. That's saying nothing positive about Joe Biden's people. I think they're among the worst people in the world. I just think the people around Trump are worse.
So you make it again. You make a lot of great points. You're a very smarty pants guy, which is why I like to have you on. But had the Democrat, but the reason why the left didn't oppose Donald Trump like they should have is because there actually isn't a left that has a political party in this country. The Democrats aren't actually left. And so they didn't oppose Donald Trump. You and I both know that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the Democrats passed his entire legislative agenda and fast-tracked his judges while she was ripping up his State of the Union speech, which is just theater, right? So there isn't actually an opposition in politics, right? And that's why we need actually a political party that actually is left. And so, but to bolster my point, Barack Obama was allowed to expand the war in Afghanistan, do Libya, drop 26,000 bombs on Syria, and nobody made a peep. Donald Trump does one bombing in Iran, and everybody's hey, what's going on, right? So everybody's like, these guys are warmongers. So that would never have happened under Barack Obama. It didn't happen. The evidence is already in. So I get what you're saying, but I think there's merit to what you're saying. But the merit to what you're saying is that the Democratic Party is so calcified and so corrupted that they could never oppose anything effectively anyway. And that is true. And the mistake the actual left makes, that is when the quote-unquote Democratic left party is in power, they go to sleep and they don't hold their elected leaders' feet to the fire. But anyway, it's been a good debate. Let's get into the real reason I wanted to bring you on. But thank you for making those points, because sometimes I need a foil so people can see how smart I am.
I push back. I push back, kid. That's what
He pushes back. I
love you, Aaron.
He pushes back. Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?